Hello everyone. In this lecture, we will be learning Cypress timeouts and debugging. So, what is this timeouts? Is actually what we hear most time about. Like this can be considered also waits and debugging in Cypress, like how to debug your code. So global timeouts. So basically, by default in Cypress, we have seen the default options in the cypress.config.js. There are some default timeouts for each action in Cypress. So let's see them one by one. So default command timeout, for example, this command. If we go to our framework, for example, setting this one, you can also override this option. This is already set to default value on the test runner. If you want to see, you can check test runner. What is the default current timeout? But basically, this default command timeout is the Cypress will wait for most commands before considering them timed out. So what I mean by that is basically, let's say you are going to call cy.get, right? And what we said while we are learning the default assertions, basically Cypress will try that command to be visible in the user interface, and it will try up to default milliseconds. Let's say if you say 10,000 milliseconds, it will try and wait for that element to be visible on the DOM for 10 seconds. Well, this is default timeout. So default timeout is directly related to the time that it's also the Cypress is asserting the if element is there or not. And the second one, page load timeout. So this is the duration Cypress will wait for commands like cy.visit or cy.go. These are navigation commands, right? To load their resources. So this page, basically what we remembered by the cy.visit, if you remember our before lectures, that cy.visit also verifies that if the page successfully loaded. This is coming from the API by getting 200 success code. So normally by default it has some value, as I say. You can just go ahead and check from the Cypress test runner what is the what is the default value. But basically it will wait for that amount of time, so you can increase that time. This request timeout, this is directly related to especially with the API, but Web Cypress will wait for commands such as cy.request or fixtures. We will be seeing the fixtures, or cy.get when fetching resources like scripts or style sheets to complete. So response timeout, this is also related to directly to Cypress APIs. The duration, Cypress will wait for a server to respond to certain requests, those made by cy.visit or request. And exec timeout, the time Cypress will wait for cy.exec command to finish to execute. We will not be touching to Cypress this.cy.exec commands. That's why I can tell this like first four is the most important one. So by default, Cypress has predetermined values for these timeouts. So as we covered in our before lecture, to customize them, we should go and define the desired values explicitly in our configuration file in here. So these are called global timeouts. As I say, uh, depending on your needs or depending on your application, you can always change and play with these timeouts. And there is something called explicit timeouts. So what I mean by that, basically we can provide these timeouts by explicitly. For example, your timeout on your framework, for example, for element to be found could be default to 4 seconds, but by here you can increase it to 5 seconds. Actually, let's take an example and let's see what I mean. I will just go to framework and I will say new file 06 underscore, let's say timeouts.cy.js. Let's create our group of test blocks. Let's say let's say we will visit the tech global web page. So we can just get this front end and click on HTML elements. So from here, let's say we are in the HTML elements and we want to validate if some element is visible. So what I'm gonna do, I will just give some kind of random name, and I will just give some random wrong name. Let's say random name. We don't have this kind of locator. We know that in our framework, right? So by default, what I remember, this is set to fail in 4 seconds if Cypress cannot find in 4 seconds. So let's do npx Cypress open. Let's open our test runner, because from there we will see clearly how long we will wait for that. I'll run the timeouts, and now it will go there. So as you can see, the command wait up to 4 seconds. Like you can just see from here. So we can say this is already set to 4 seconds to validate if the element is there or not. So if you want, actually, you can increase this one by providing an option. So Cypress commands has an options that you can always play and manipulate them. What I mean by that, for example, let's say you can provide these options inside the curly braces. So for example, when I say timeout for here as like 5000 milliseconds, instead of waiting 4 seconds this time, you will be seeing that it's gonna wait for 5 seconds actually. You see, since we increase the time, it's waiting for 5 seconds. By the way, what is good about this one, in 5 seconds, if it finds, it will not still continue waiting for 5 seconds. This is not a hard wait. This is not pausing your framework. This is basically, you are just increasing the time range, that how long you want Cypress to search for that element in the DOM. So whenever it finds it, it will not going to wait for rest seconds that's left. Let's say if it finds in 2 seconds, it's not going to wait for 3 seconds. It will execute the condition in the 2 seconds. So also I was talking about this, like the options. These are something you can see on the Cypress website. But for example, let's say there's some element that you are having a problem to click. So you can just provide force true. This command is going to force to click this item, even though it is blocked by another element. So these are called options. And this is very like common and popular way to add different functionalities to function in JavaScript. So you can see these with the different frameworks. So for example, you can do the same thing for the visit to. Let's say you want to visit the page. You can also increase this timeout too. You can say, for example, this is default to I don't know how many seconds, but you can just, for example, make it 10,000 milliseconds. And if your page cannot find the element in for example, like 5 seconds, maybe it needs like 7 seconds after finding the element. Actually, maybe it's not getting the success code, because when we visit, we don't find the element, right? When we visit it, for example, imagine that your page cannot be loaded in 5 seconds, so you have to increase this amount. So you can just make it 10,000 milliseconds, so it will wait up to 10 seconds. So what we can do by that, we can also, for example, reflect this. What I mean by reflect this, let's just query a real element. Let's say HTML elements, and I want to query. By the way, let me just show you a quick and easy way to locate the element in Cypress, because we are pretty much kind of advanced. So by clicking this button in here, it's like an aim icon, it's gonna give you to interact with the web elements. By the way, when you mouse over them, you will see that it's suggesting you some locators already. So when you click one of them, let's say it's gonna give you your locator in here. So you can just click the copy to clipboard and get this locator. And I'm just going to comment out this one. And let's say I will do timeout for this one, 5000 milliseconds. And let's say I also want to click, right? And let's say my click timeout is also set to 4 milliseconds, for example, 4000 milliseconds. I can also increase that one too. I can say 10,000. So this way it's pretty much dynamic. So you can use with many commands like increasing timeout. If you don't want to increase your timeout in your framework explicitly, because maybe you don't want this option to be default for all of your tests. Maybe you only want for a specific page or specific web element. Then you can just provide these commands. Just a second. So you can provide these commands by inline, by providing these timeouts. So from the CLI, we can also increase these timeouts too. So I'm not going to run this commands because from the CLI, it will be hard to see to like what these options will return, in case of a failure. So all you need to do is, as we've seen before, if you guys remember that, for example, from the CLI, we have learned that we can just overwrite these options that we have in the cypress.config.js, right? So for example, our viewport width is set to 1920 and height is set to like 180. And what we did is basically we changed them to lower resolutions, right? So as I said on that lecture, you can just overwrite this any option that you have on your CLI. So as well as these are persist for the this timeouts too. So if you want for a specific test, for example, from the CLI, you can also increase these timeouts too. So cy.wait. So this cy.wait, the difference than this timeouts, this cy.wait is actually a freezing command. So let's see. Of course, it's asking us. For example, this is a hard wait. The cy.wait is a hard wait. Let me just put it in here. When we just provide this like wait command, let's say I want to wait explicitly 3000 milliseconds. So you will see a wait here. For next action, it's going to hard wait and pause your framework to get action for 3000 seconds. So this wait is basically pausing your framework. Even though everything is ready, it will not your command to go in next action. It's gonna pause your command. So in general, this is not very useful in the automation frameworks. And this is not very suggested to use it. Some legacy automation frameworks also using this kind of approach by the language itself. For example, for Java, there is also like there's a way to pause your commands. So that's why these are not very suggested to use. But what is good about this is basically you just need this for debugging purposes. For example, like let's say you are not really sure that if element is like not founded on the DOM, or maybe you need some wait, right? So by this one you can debug. You can just put this hard wait to see that like if the problem is the page, or if the problem is your script, or maybe if the problem that maybe you need to add wait. So by using this cy.wait, you can just kind of debug your conditions, like So it will going to help you to write your automation scripts better in some challenging conditions. As I say, but normally when you understand, let's say you just find out it's like in 3000 seconds, you can just provide it in here, right? You don't need to deal with this one anymore. You can just remove this. But this is not very suggested. As I say, on legacy frameworks, it's very popular to use. Like it's, for example, on Java, we were using like thread.sleep, but these commands are pausing your execution. So it won't let your execution to move on for the next section. It's pausing for the amount of seconds that you provide in here. As I say, this is only good for debugging purposes when you have some challenging test scripts. Other than that, this is not very suggested. So debugging in Cypress and leveraging built-in features. So actually, this is a debugging in Cypress also. Like by seeing like what happens in each command, because as you can see, it's also showing us our mouse. Like you can just see that the red dot is clicking on it and it's going in this page. We are on this page. We get this element. We are here. So as you can see, actually, Cypress is giving us a really good view by from this like real-time debugger. This is also called, like, for example, like the traveling between these steps is called real-time debugger, and you can just debug it by here too. Or you can see from the cloud. We will see the cloud integration, but from cloud you can see debugging too. But especially this is not very preferred way to be to debug. Especially these are companies are prefer this way to debug their problems on their framework using the Cypress like Cypress dashboard. We will see this like a little bit about the Cypress dashboard. But if you go run, so as I said, this is a real-time debugger. So real-time reloading. Cypress automatically reloads whenever you save a test file. So by the way, this is also a debug for you, right? Whenever we just save our file, Cypress automatically reloads the tests. Like for example, right now, whenever I do, you see like this command line is keep moving, and keep moving, like which means like there's some tests are going on the behind. When I save it, you see it happens. When I save it again, it happens. But this time like the real-time reloading. So Cypress automatically reloads to whenever we save the test file. So this feature allows us to see the effects, the changes in the real time, making it easier to debug and write tests simultaneously. Time traveling, this is what I was just showing you, right? This was actually time traveling. Cypress takes snapshots of your tests as they run. You can hover over the commands in the command log to see exactly what happened in each step, including the state of the DOM, the change its state, and the more. And the command log. So the command log on the left side of the Cypress test runner provides a detailed history. This is also like this is also called like command log 2, by the way. This is like history, timeout, not timeout, like history and the command log of your tests. And it provides a detailed history of the entire test execution. It shows every command. By the way, this is also called time traveling too, because these are like each are like these snapshots of your tests. Anyway, it provides detailed history of entire test execution. It shows every command, its arguments, its return a value, and how long each command took. By just, for example, whenever it's failed, like it's giving us that detailed information, right? So clicking on command will display more information about it, including a snapshot of the DOM at that point. So what is it is basically like, this is called DOM snapshot, like you see, it's highlights. You can see in here, you can turn it off or you can open it. So by here, you can see like what's going on in this highlight by just clicking on it. You can just remove this. You see, it says like DOM snapshots on top. You can just click and get more detail, pinned before, after. These are pretty much straightforward and easy to understand. So video recording, we will see this, like these are like something we will be including on the test execution reports and also screenshots. Cypress also giving us an option to get the video of those tests, like when we get the failure, or give us the screenshot when we get the failure. By the way, you can just set it to always, but in general we only set them true to like only like to take this snapshot of that test or the video recording of that test in case of failure. not only successful tests. So there's another way to pause your framework. This is also another way of debugging, but let's see how it looks like. So I can just go ahead and just put cy.pause here. So when I do this, you will see something different in the framework. Like look at in here. Like we only see this run all test buttons, and we see this like collapsing and expanding our command line, and we're running our like this like retry. I guess this is a retry symbol, and fail and a success. So let's see what happens when I put the pause. As you can see, when I put the pause, right now framework paused the execution completely. This is one of the like really most useful way of debugging on your framework. And what you can do is basically from here, you can just come here and say resume, which will going to let your test resume. Or from here, you can go to next step, like each step one by one. So what was our next step was here, was clicking the HTML web element, right? First locating it, contains HTML web element, and I click, and we find this hello paragraph, and we click on it, then our test is success. Or let's say you did this one, by just clicking this one, it will just resume all execution. But if you want to see the step by step, you can just use this next button. If you press the resume button, it will execute all tests, but if you do press on the next button, it will go one by one. And this is very useful, especially when you need to debug something. Let's say you supposed to see something on the page, it's not appears, you cannot catch it, it's too fast, right? Because this is one of the best thing about the Cypress, like tests are really fast, so sometimes you cannot even see what's going on. That's why this option would be really good to debug in case if you have any issue in your scripts. And we have another one, cy.debug. So this is also one of the really useful way of the debug. So this cy.debug command is used to start a debugger from your tests. So it's adding a debugger statement in your JavaScript code. When this command is run and developer console of your browser is opens, the execution will stop, allowing you to inspect the current state of your application to the DOM and the variables available at that point. What I mean by that, so imagine that right now we will put this debug in here. So when I run my framework for next time, it's going to open this developer tool automatically for us. So I will just save it and run the test. Okay, we have the debug in here. Okay, I'll just restart this one and we'll rerun it. Yeah, you have to open your developer tools by yourself. So whenever it catches debug, it will pause the test. So from the console, you can just go and see this each subject, like in what happens in each subject. And from here, just like we did from next button, you can just step over on the next command to understand what's going on. Like what returns to what. And you can get the detailed information of like your results. Maybe you store something, what it returns, you are getting an object, you are getting a string, and etc. You can get this detailed information. Since we don't have really long test, it's really hard to show like how it looks like, but it stops the execution on the point that you put. You can also chain this one too. What I mean by that, you can just chain it in here. I can just say debug. You see right now. We just have a failure. Okay, right now the test runner is again a little bit flaky, so I will kill the test runner. I will go developer tool, remove this and rerun the test. Now as you see, it stopped on our debugging point. We can again go one by one to see what's going on. From the scope you can also see what's going on, but it's suggested to follow from here. You see, it's giving us what happened during this until this point in our framework. This is our hello paragraph, its length, its more details, and etc. As I say, like when you have more detailed test case, this is going to make more sense how to use it. But this debug, like I cannot tell that you will really need, after you know how to use this pause, how to use this, for example, like wait, like, or like time travel debugging, or like the traveling between your commands from here, or like providing the proper weights when you are debugging. You will not need it too much. Also, other than that, what you can do is basically, for example, you can just specify the breaking point in here. But for here, of course, we need to provide the script. But let's say it's just debug. I think we need to provide a command from here. Yeah, to be able to debug from here, we need to provide the command. Let's say but it's gonna run everything, so this is just gonna take too much time. But this is just how you were debugging using the JavaScript. This is the same thing. You can also debug your framework from here too. But why I don't want to show here, because when I run this test right now, it's gonna run all the test files, which is something I don't want, and debugging gonna be hard. But that's why instead of running that one, this is, as I say, basically the same debugging as you learn on the JavaScript. But for the Cypress, you can just use this debugging options. But this is what I was about to show you. This is about the JavaScript. This is not related to Cypress. So this was all about today's class. Thank you very much for your time. So see you on next lecture.